All right, so after about 7 or 8 minutes worth of work here, this is the effect I've come up with so far. It's called manually assigned colors.ai, and it's found inside the 24 gradients folder. And incidentally, if you're ever trying to gauge the colors inside of a shape and you don't want all those selection edges in the way, all you do is that same keyboard shortcut we've been using all this time, Control H or Command H on the Mac to hide the selection, or Control H or Command H again to bring it back. Now, a couple of other things I want you to note. In addition to shift-clicking to lift colors from the tracing template, you can shift-click in order to lift colors from inside the gradient as well. So let's say, for example, that I want these 2 points to be lighter so that we have a highlight at this location. I'm working with my wide arrow tool, so I clicked on one, I shift-clicked on the other. I'll press the I key to switch over to the eyedropper, and I will shift-click once again. So shift-clicking will go ahead and lift that color and assign it to the active attribute regardless of whether you're shift-clicking on the original tracing template or within the gradient mesh as you're working on it. Now, what if you want to make some adjustments to the colors manually inside the color panel, for example? Well, then in that case, what I recommend you do is work with HSB, the HSB color model, and you can get to it, by the way, by going up to the color panel flyout menu and choosing HSB. And the advantage of HSB is you can decide, all right, I want to stick with red, which is 0 degrees, by the way, is a hue value. And I want to make sure that I'm sticking with red the whole time. And then if I decide I want to brighten up these colors a little bit, I'll increase that brightness value. But what you have to make sure you do, if you're going to increase the brightness, notice that you're going to bring a ton of warmth into that area of the pepper. And if you take a close look at how the colors in the peppers are organized in the first place, you'll see that they drift into these sort of blues. At least by comparison, they look to be a little blue. What they really are is low saturation reds. So what I recommend you do is, if you're going to increase the brightness, then take down the saturation a little bit. If you're going to decrease the brightness, then pump up the saturation. Because that way you won't get oversaturated highlights and you won't get undersaturated dead shadows. Anyway, I'm going to take this saturation value down to, let's say, about 54. And the values will change on you a little bit. They'll spring because we're working in the RGB mode and Illustrator's trying to match the closest RGB equivalent to these HSB values. All right, now I'm going to press the A key to switch back to my black arrow tool. And I'm going to select a couple of colors right there, a couple of these anchor points in order to make them active. And I'm going to just manually adjust my HSB values this time around. I'm going to enter, as always, a hue value of 90 degrees. Then I'm going to pump up the saturation value to 90%, and I'm going to take the brightness value down to 62%. So this time around, I'm compensating for a low brightness value with a high saturation value. Because if I let the saturation value drop, notice I end up getting this horrible gray right there, and it doesn't look very dark either. So saturation is going to infuse that shadow with color, and it's going to make it appear deeper as well. All right, let's try a couple of other things here. I'll grab this point, and I'll press the I key to get my eyedropper, and I'll shift-click in order to lift that color. I should have selected that point in the first place, but I just forgot to, I guess. And now I'll press the A key to grab my wide arrow tool, and I'll click and shift-click on these pair of colors right there, and I'm going to manually adjust them once again. I'm going to change the hue value to 0 degrees. I'm going to take the saturation value down to 74%, and I'm going to take the brightness value up to 70% so that we get this nice even red shade right there. So again, different ways to work. If you want to go in and manually adjust those color values, that's the way I recommend you do it. You may find that Illustrator every once in a while, because we're working once again in the RGB mode, that it bounces you back to the RGB sliders. In which case, if it does that, I very much recommend that you don't tweak the RGB sliders. They're just harder to work with where shading and tinting is concerned. And you just go ahead and go to your flyout menu, switch back to HSB, and edit your colors in this model. All right, so that's how you go about finessing the colors of your anchor points. In the next exercise, we're going to begin working on these background objects, and I'm going to show you a different way to create a gradient mesh.